day to all the viewers and readers of DNA. Welcome to another episode of Interviews with Heads of Missions. Today we have with us the ambassador from Ukraine. From the picturesque Carpathian Mountains to the Black Sea, the Golden Gate to Novochny Park, Ukraine's unique landscape, culture, and cuisine will leave you wanting more. More varenyky, dumplings from heaven. Deruny, potato pancakes you won't soon forget. And those scrumptious stuffed cabbage rolls, holubchi. It is our greatest hope we can all visit this beautiful nation and taste all of these wonderful foods very soon. We are humbled to be in the presence of Her Excellency Kateryna Zelenko, Ukrainian ambassador to Singapore. Ambassador, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, you arrived more than 2 years ago to Singapore. Could you kindly describe your stay so far from a personal and professional point of view?
It's always a great privilege and an honor to represent your country abroad. I remember when I arrived to Singapore, it was the time of a COVID pandemic, and it was quite a challenging time for many of us diplomats, as we were quite compromised in our efforts to do different events and to find the ways how we can represent our country in the best way. But at the same time, it was a very interesting period for me to see and to feel how Singapore lives, how other people of Singapore. I will never forget the words of my good colleague and friend who used to live in Singapore many years ago. And before I went to Singapore, I asked him, how are Singaporeans? And he said, they can be good friends. And now, after 2.5 years, I can clearly say that this is true. I have been blessed to get to know many incredible people in this country. And especially now, when I'm in the most important role, I think, because my country is undergoing quite a challenging time, I can say that I feel this friendship and solidarity with the people of Singapore and their support. And that is something that encourages us and gives us strength.
Well, that brings me to my next question. Ambassador, how would you describe both the material and moral support given by the authorities and people of Singapore to your country as it is defending its territory from external military aggression?
We highly appreciate the strong and clear position of the government of Singapore. On one of the first days of the invasion, Singapore openly and publicly condemned the invasion by the Russian Federation. And on one of the first days, Singapore became the first and so far the only country in ASEAN that introduced the sanctions against the aggressor state. And we, of course, are grateful to Singapore for its strong and clear position within the United Nations and its co-sponsoring and voting in favor of the resolutions that condemn the invasion and support the territorial integrity and state sovereignty of Ukraine. This is one point. The second pillar is, of course, the support of the people of Singapore. As of now, we can clearly say that Singapore provided the largest in the region amount of humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. We could very effectively work with the Red Cross, and it helped us raise millions to facilitate humanitarian assistance and providing help to the people on the ground. As one of the examples, I can tell you that Singapore is now one of the largest donors of the most famous Ukrainian children's hospital, Ohmadiv, that was targeted by the Russian missiles on one of the first days of the invasion. And the second example is also Singapore's support for the community of deaf people in Ukraine, which is now quite a big deal because as a result of mass shellings and artillery attacks, many small children, babies, lost their capacities to hear. That is something that we addressed from the very first days, and I'm really grateful to the fascinating people of Singapore who did not only donate did not only overwhelm us with the calls and messages of support, they also took their time. They went to the Polish border to provide food, warm clothes to the people who left Ukraine as refugees to find safe life for their children and to try to protect them. That is something that we will never forget. It will always remain in our hearts. And I can, again, repeat that Singapore is a country of fascinating people.
I'm just thinking of what my wife told me about her time in Kiev and the pictures that she showed me of how beautiful Kiev is. And we were discussing, we wonder if any of these places still look the same after what's been happening. And it breaks the heart to think of how beauty has been sacrificed in a situation like this. Just wanted to share that and just explain why I'm feeling this way. Ambassador, Singapore is known to be one of the strongest economies in the region and a vital international business hub. Would you kindly highlight the main accomplishments within the spheres of foreign investment and trade between Singapore and the Ukraine?
Yeah, this is the major sphere of cooperation that we have if we talk about Singapore. For us, this is a very important springboard to access the ASEAN market with its more than 630 million people. As we all know, and now Ukraine has become quite an eye-opener to so many as one of the major producers and providers of essential food products globally. And of course, we can also support Singapore in its ambition to become a regional agriculture hub. And that's what we are doing now to bolster Singapore's and this region's food security. I'm really pleased as ambassador that last year, the year when the full-scale invasion started, we could increase our trade and our exports to Singapore by 37% by means of selling Ukrainian agricultural food products. Singapore has already opened its market for Ukrainian poultry meat products, for processed meat, for table eggs, sunflower oil, honey, and we are working at extending these opportunities because despite the war, there's still a lot that Ukraine has to offer. And we, of course, try to live up to our commitment as the main provider of food, as we do not have to only think about our survival. It's also about supporting many vulnerable societies across the globe. Ukraine used to deliver grain to, and we are now working with our partners to make sure that these sea corridors will safely walk so that we could deliver grain to the countries in Africa, Middle East, so that they could at least make sure that no uncertainty, no waves of instability could occur.
Thank you for sharing that. Ambassador, Singapore has a complex cultural identity given the diverse nature of its constituents. Is that something Ukraine has in common? And how would you define the Ukrainian cultural identity within an ever more intercultural and global world? How is this unique identity expressed in society?
Yes, I made my first impression of Singapore as a mature and cohesive society when I first had the honor to attend the celebration of the National Day of Singapore, on the 9th of August. And, my feeling when I really felt this atmosphere, when I looked into the eyes of the people celebrating with me, Singaporeans, they are really happy to be the representatives of this society, knowing that one of the major pillars of their peaceful coexistence with one another as a multicultural, multi-religious society is respect, tolerance, something that is quite sacred for this country and for this community. And I first came to an idea that is something we have in common with Ukraine, because Ukraine is also a very multicultural and multi-religious society. Not everyone knows that more than 2 million Muslims lived in Ukraine before the start of the invasion. Today, more than 85% of Ukrainians consider themselves as citizens of Ukraine, and only 4% of citizens consider themselves as representatives of certain ethnic groups. although we have more than 19 ethnic groups in Ukraine. And it's also the matter of different languages. But I can honestly tell you that we have never had any rifts, any divisions between representatives of different groups. The same is applicable for the language. Many things that we can today hear and see from the Russian propaganda channels does not correspond to the reality and to the real facts, because since my young years, I remember at the university where I studied, and this is one of the largest universities in Ukraine, how many representatives from different parts of Ukraine became friends, lived together, celebrated the best parties, and it was actually the great time for us to grow up and to become real Ukrainians. And that is something that we feel now, because I think the full-scale invasion of Ukraine is something that to some extent bolstered and boosted our national identity. Now we see ourselves as a nation that only unified and only strong can overcome all the difficulties and achieve victory. That is something we always have to think about. And that is something that helps us today to feel ourselves as quite a mature community too, because without looking out for one another, taking care of one another, we can hardly move ahead.
There's something we learned from COVID as well.
Oh, yes, pretty much.
Now, on a lighter note, Singapore is considered by many an eating paradise. As you said earlier, almost every conversation you have with a local doesn't veer too far away from food. What are your local favorite dishes, and how does it compare with traditional Ukrainian cuisine?
Living in Singapore, it's like being part of the non-stop food festival of local, international, and fusion cuisine. In fact, we are so spoiled here that you can actually choose the cuisine you're gonna enjoy depending on your mood. If you want to celebrate with your friends the Chinese New Year, start with bak kut teh. If you feel not well and need to tank power, laksa must be your choice. If you want to dive into the local scene, please try lor mee. And of course, you can always enjoy a good portion of dumplings, which is also quite similar to our Ukrainian dumplings, and shows how interdependent our cultures are. And it's also great that here in Singapore, people welcome something new. They're always happy to try new taste, and that gives us opportunity to bring Ukraine closer. Regretfully, we do not have a Ukrainian restaurant here. You can try Ukrainian dishes at some places, but if you really want to bring Ukrainian cuisine closer, we take it as a chance to organize different cultural festivals. For example, this year we had a big food and fashion festival where everyone could try Ukrainian food. We started a beautiful tradition of celebrating Ukrainian Christmas with our traditional cuisine in one of the restaurants in Singapore. So there are a lot of opportunities to give it a try. Just follow the news on our Facebook and you will be able to enjoy it.
I hope I get invited to one of these to try all the food that my wife mentioned that you tell me is so wonderful. I'm looking forward to that. But if you were to have one meal in Singapore, like maybe the day before you leave Singapore, for example, I hope that day is not soon, what dish would that be?
I think I would definitely go for a chili crab.
Why not just go for the best, right?
Yes. Why not?
Yeah, I totally understand. Get your hands dirty.
Oh, yeah. I'm well trained already.
Oh, yeah. Well,
How to eat chili crab without making your hands dirty.
And you notice we don't always wear bibs, right?
Yeah.
It's okay to get our clothes dirty because the crab is the star. This last question, it's pretty pertinent and close to your heart, I'm sure. Diplomats are the peacekeepers of the 21st century. Would you say this statement is true? And would you say it would be even better if there were more female diplomats? And why?
In my opinion, that's the way it has to be. The diplomacy is the way to to be a peacekeeper and to try to find the peaceful resolution for every conflict. I mean, we live in the age of high technologies, of artificial intelligence. We explore the universe. And at the same time, we need to tackle the barbaric invasion by one country against another. That is something that definitely does not contribute to the progress. That's why diplomacy has gained a new role and more important one, to find the ways how we can find the solution at the negotiation table. Sooner or later, the negotiations will come. Every war becomes subject to negotiations at the end of it. But to get there, we need to make sure that every diplomacy is robust enough, is backed by the strong military to be plausible and to be effective. That is something that we need. One of the principles of that is to avoid appeasement and any imitation of negotiation process. So we really need substance to talk about, and we of course need to make sure that we can protect the principles and the rules-based order of the post-war reality that we have after the most devastating military conflict of the Second World War. And now we are again in a situation where the rules-based order is compromised. And that is why we always say that the war in Ukraine is not only about Ukraine. We live in the world where the threat to one imperils the security of all. And if we do not make sure that Ukraine wins this war and the rules-based order and the UN Charter are protected, then no one can ever feel secure. And speaking about the role of women, well, as a female diplomat, I am the one who is, of course, one of those who can say that it's not a very easy way for a woman to make a career as a diplomat and to achieve success in her professional life. But that is something that works. Women are quite flexible. They are creative. They are quite strong in difficult situations. They can really find a good way how to get away with that. So I think there must be a robust instrument how we can support young women willing to move ahead on this path. It will not be an easy one, but that is something that can give you more confidence. And that is something that matters to every woman. Because again, in the 21st century, women have already proved that they can also help make a difference and make the strong contribution to the flourishing and prospering world that can be a safer place than it is now.
Well, you're living proof that that can happen.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much.
A pleasure. Thank you.